thank you very much. I think with this format, maybe it's better that I sit down, but I would like to stand up first and thank everybody for being here, and also, of course, for the organizers, Raymond, Diana, and Jason, for inviting me. It's great to be here. I'm very conscious that I'm actually here during your lunchtime, and you had a whole morning working very hard for whatever is your resolution or amendment to the resolution, and you have lots of debates. So maybe you're a bit tired, but I hope that at least some of the questions, even in my answers, would be able to excite you, and I look forward to a very meaningful exchange with all of you. Thank you very much for having me.
So I'll be starting the Q&A session, and afterwards you guys can just ask any questions then. So at IGNIS MUN, apart from public speaking and debating skills, we also have a very strong emphasis on negotiation and collaboration skills. That is to be diplomatic. So what is your experience with diplomacy? Would you say that it's easy to negotiate when other legislatures, for example, oppose your view or something like that?
First of all, I am not sure if negotiations and diplomacy necessarily have a causal effect, because diplomacy, very often you consider it to be being diplomatic and having nice exchanges, trying to understand each other, and so on. But negotiations, very often you want to come to some kind of a compromise. And negotiations, to me, very often depend only perhaps very small portion on diplomacy, but more so really on power and interest. I mean, if you have the power to really be the one calling the shots, then of course you very often will be able to force your will on the other side, even if you don't have much diplomacy. And on the other hand, even if you have lots of diplomacy, you're very good at communication and putting your point across, but if you have really no chips in your hands, then it's like banging your head against the wall. You feel that, in the Chinese saying, you are the scholar in the jungle, because you try every reason you can think of, and you can be really skillful debater, and you can answer every point the other side have, but they just pretend not to understand you, and you don't get anywhere. So my experience in the legislature is very often it's about naked power. If you've got the votes, then of course very often you get your way. But there is an exception, of course. That exception comes in the rare occasions when the people is on your side, even though you are in the minority, but then the people are behind you, in which case even the power has to give way. Because ultimately it's really about people's interests, public interests, people's power. One example I would give was in 2003, when I was in the Legislative Council. The government wanted to pass Article 23 legislation on national security. And I spent all my time in the Bills Committee trying to reason with Regina Ip, wasn't getting anywhere. And the pro-establishment legislators wasn't interested at all. They were going through the motions, but they were always in the majority, whereas I was amongst the minority, and I really didn't know what to do. It's very frustrating, because every time the reporters would ask me questions about this, that, and the other, and I would explain what I think, and then the reporter always ended with the question, well then, what next? Or what are you going to do? I hate those kind of questions, because I don't know the answer. Well, at that time I didn't know the answer. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what was going to happen. I was sure the bill was going to be passed, because there's just no way it wasn't going to be passed, because you look at all the legislators in the Bills Committee and also around you, they had the majority and they had the votes. And, you know, it looked like a certainty. And what happened on the 1st of July was a huge surprise, even to me. Because it wasn't until that day when I left my home to go out and join the march that I suddenly realized that everybody I see in the street was dressed in black. It was absolutely amazing. And I was in the MTR station, and everybody who came out was dressed in black. And it suddenly dawned on me that, you know, they were all joining the march. And then, of course, eventually it was said that 500,000 turned out, and nobody ever questioned that figure. So, I mean, the belief is, in fact, there were more than 500,000. But anyway, after that march, and if I believe correctly, it was on the Thursday, I thought the government was going to change. But the government didn't. Then, 2 days later, well, in fact, every morning reporters went and asked each Tone, what are you going to do? And Sitchin said, good morning. The second day, the reporters went to ask Mr. Tone, what are you going to do? Mr. Tone said, good morning. The third day, the same, he said good morning for 3 days. And then on Saturday afternoon, around about 1 o'clock or so, he came out, met the press, and he was accompanied by the whole array of EXCO members. They were all lined up, and they said, we're going to put the bill to legislation as said, as promised, and we're going to pass this bill. So I was a bit frantic at that time on the Saturday, you know, 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I didn't know what to do because it was going to happen the next Wednesday. Said people have spoken, government insists on going ahead. What can you do? I mean, you can't go and shoot a machine gun or something. I mean, I didn't know. At that time, I had never thought of anything like occupying Lechko as the Taiwanese students are doing. I mean, I'm used to a very law-abiding lawyer. So I was a bit frantic. I thought we're going to do the Yellow Ribbon campaign to ask people to surround Lechko, not march into Lechko, but surround Lechko on the 9th of July. And then, of course, in the early hours of Monday morning, James Dean told that he was going to resign from EXCO. He wasn't going to support the bill, and the news came out really in the early hours of the Monday morning. And that, of course, changed history. And that's because the Liberal Party had to take part in elections. They want to really take part in direct elections more than functional constituency elections. And that's why, you know, they had to listen to the people. And that was an example of a rare occasion where the people actually spoke and changed the power politics in Lechko. So I hope that gives you some idea of diplomacy, negotiations, and ultimately, you know, public interest.
Thank you, Ms. Yu, for that very inspiring and informative answer. Right now, we're going to open up the floor to questions.
So may I just raise a question that how would you comment on Hong Kong's people's trend of looking forward to the British colonial rule in the past, given that it seems quite obvious that the British government was just giving more democracy to Hong Kong after the signing of the Joint Declaration, and it seems to be just a hindrance to the Chinese government rule rights now. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that question. It's really quite interesting because when you think back to the colonial days, because you're too young You're all born after 97, right? Right? Yes. No? Some of them born, well, anyway, you're too young to remember what it was like in 97. Basically, during the British colonial days, they didn't really give Hong Kong democracy, but they gave us rule of law. They gave us a certain kind, they gave us lots of freedom in the sense that you could criticize the government, you could do whatever you want to do, and provided you work hard, you get somewhere. In the really old days, there was inequality in the sense that there were disparity in the employment terms for Chinese and for foreigners, particularly for those from UK. But gradually, that was changed, so there was equal pay and for equal work, that kind of thing. So by and large, I think Hong Kong people were quite satisfied with the colonial rule, even though there wasn't democracy. But then, of course, Tiananmen Square and also the negotiations started after Thatcher, visited Beijing, Deng Xiaoping. But by then, of course, Beijing had a say, and they don't want democracy to be speeded up. So there was a conflict, there was a tension there, in particular when Chris Patten was our last governor, and he was very determined to give Hong Kong a greater and a faster pace of democracy. And there was a huge conflict between him and Lu Ping. You remember Lu Ping called Chris Patten a sinner's of 1,000 years, because basically, there was this difference. And I think in Chris Patten's days, he did try to speed up, but then by then it was really too late. And recently, he came back to Hong Kong, and a few Hong Kong people went to greet him with the colonial flag, and also, with signs saying, "We miss you, please come back." And I knew Ensign Chan was going to see Chris Patten, so I did ask Ensign afterwards. I said, "How did Chris Patten, feel about this?" And Ensign said he was truly embarrassed. He didn't know what to do. He had to run away from these people. And you can well imagine, it's actually very British in the sense that he didn't want any of this sort of missing him and missing the colonial rule. And in fact, it's diametrically opposite to what Hong Kong people, as a majority, ought to be fighting for. Because you're fighting for democracy. It's contradictory in terms to say to a former colonial government representative that actually we would rather you come back and rule us. So you can see the embarrassment and conflict there. But I think a lot of people who actually do this probably do it because they really want to put some kind of embarrassment on the central authorities, rather than really because they really want a colonial rule. Maybe they just want to embarrass the Chinese central authorities, central government, to say that, look, what we're doing a bad job, SAR government is doing a bad job, and therefore we'd much rather have the kind of life that Hong Kong had in the colonial days. But I still think it's in the minority. This is not what the majority of Hong Kong people feel, and personally, I think that most of Hong Kong people are, in fact, patriotic in the sense that they believe in one country, but they also want two systems. And this is the unique position that Hong Kong is in. And in fact, it's if there is ever one message that I can bring you in this exchange, is how important it is for people like you, for people in Hong Kong, for people who care, for people who are educated, for people who love Hong Kong, to stand up for one country, two systems. Because you are the people who are going to uphold the values in the system in Hong Kong. Nobody else is going to do that. You cannot rely on the British government to do that. You cannot rely on the Chinese government to do that either. And to a certain extent, you can't rely on the SAR government to do that either. Because very often there is a tension between the people and also whoever is the governing power. It's always from the governance point of view to say, well, we want more efficiency, we want people just to keep quiet, we want people really just to take whatever we think is best for the people. This is natural from a point of view of those who are in power. But from the point of view of the people, you always want a say, because particularly in Hong Kong, where we have lots of reserves, lots of surpluses, where is the money going to go to? How is it going to be spent? Particularly when Hong Kong has such a serious Gini coefficient disparity between the rich and the poor. Is the money going to education? Is the money going to the relief of poverty? Is the money going to business, IT development, or what? And there is a huge difference between the legal system in Hong Kong, the legal system in the mainland, and there is also a huge difference in viewpoint between what actually is stability, between the views of the mainland and the views of Hong Kong people. And so if we want to continue with our way of life, with our liberties and equalities, then it's really up to us to uphold the current system. And you don't do that by waving the British colonial flag. I hope I answered your question.
Hi, so you're talking to a bunch of students here. So a lot of us here are pursuing education, or we will go on to pursue higher education, whether in the United States or in Hong Kong or in the UK. So in your experience, how do you think your education has shaped or influenced your political career? And do you think there's such a thing as being too intellectual or too high and mighty with your principles when it comes to the pragmatic realities of political life?
Two questions there. First one, I think my journey in life is probably more influenced by my character, my personality, more than my training. Although I think my training, my education as a lawyer does help. Particularly nowadays when the government is talking about, for example, constitutional reform, and they are always trying to use law as a kind of really oppressive instrument, because they keep saying, well, you can't have this, you can't have that, because it's outside the basic law. And I get extremely upset every time I hear something like that, because I think it's really politics wrapped with a thin legal package. It's just pretending to be law, and pretending that you are acting unlawfully if you don't listen to what those in authority say you ought to do or you ought not to do. And to me, it's not really about law. And I think what we are asking for, which is equal rights and universal suffrage, is within the law. So they're only trying to use the law as a pretext when they politically don't want to give this to you. So in that sense, I always think it helps when I'm a lawyer and I'm going, and I say that, look, this is what you're doing, because it gives me a certain kind of authority when I say something like that as a lawyer. And also I think my legal background training helped me to think analytically, helped me to communicate. So in that sense I think it's helpful. Your second question, what was the second question? I'm trying to remember your second question.
It was about the political realities.
Yes, pragmatism, that's right. Now, I'm glad you asked this question, because I always regard myself as a very pragmatic person. But being pragmatic doesn't mean giving up. There's a difference. I went to a poll organized by the RTHK. It's a very specialized kind of poll where people were asked the three questions before they listened to a debate. And then they were sitting here in a room like yourself, there were 100 of them, and then they listened to a debate between me and I also have Ma Ngok from Chinese University, and then the other side was Kang Wei-ju, Maria Tam, and also Zheng Zigong of IGNIS. And after listening to the debate for 2 hours, then the same group of people will ask the same 3 questions again, right? And I'm actually interested also in just one member of the audience who asked this question. And he said this, he said, you people want civic nomination, but Beijing already said they're not going to give it to you. So where is your plan B? Have you got the plan B? And I thought to myself, okay, Beijing says no, so you're going to give this up and you go for plan B. And if Beijing says no to plan B, are you going for plan C? And if Beijing says no to plan C, are you going to go along D, E, F until you go to Z? Is that what Hong Kong people are going to do? Is that what you mean by being pragmatic? I mean, what about standing up for principles? What about standing up for liberty, equality, real universal suffrage as promised in the Basic Law? And recently, with this incident in Taiwan, I read a piece written by a Taiwanese guy, and I loved his conclusion. And he said it in Chinese, but what I'm going to translate very roughly is this. He said, what stops people from moving forward is not hopelessness, but giving up. What moves people forward is not hope, but determination. So I think, there's a huge difference between being pragmatic and giving up. And in fact, this is my own calligraphy. I write that giving up is not in my dictionary. I just designed this for one of the items that the Civic Party sells to raise funds. So I didn't know calligraphy, and I didn't practice calligraphy in my younger days, but having founded the Civic Party, we need to raise funds, and I have to go to the flower market every Chinese New Year to write Fai Cheng. And because of that, I had to learn calligraphy. So I did it in a very short time, and I try to write words that I agree with, that I like. So I pick sentences and lines, poems, or lyrics of songs that I like, and I write them. And sometimes I do illustrations, I do a bit of painting, and put them on folders, put them on objects like a pencil case or a plastic folder, and I sell them. So that is something that I particularly like to share with Hong Kong people on, what it means to be pragmatic. And sometimes I view Hong Kong people being too pragmatic and not determined enough.
I really think that democracy and liberties are really important as a foundation of society. But it's quite sad that I can hardly recognize the bargaining power of Hong Kong peoples to ask the central governments to grant us the universal suffrage or other rights. Several examples in the mainland China, 16 million citizens are now under the one-party dictatorship. What can 7 million people in Hong Kong ask for? Liberty. It seems like not that possible. And say Hong Kong used to be the financial hub, which maybe increased our bargaining power, but many of the mainland cities like Shanghai or many special economic zones has been developed, and Hong Kong's influence or importance seems to diminish in such a way. Therefore, do you think that we still got bargaining power to bargain for democracy or universal suffrage or civil freedom?
That's also a great question. There are quite a lot of mainland people who have their money, their power, their influence in the mainland. But then, on the other hand, they have lots of money in Hong Kong. You know why? Particularly because of one country, two systems. A lot of political leaders in the mainland actually have investments through Hong Kong. They put their money here because we have a basic law that protects private property. You know, recently Kevin Lau got stabbed. Kevin Lau is the former editor of Green Power, and in fact, I wear my blue ribbon every day, and I said I would use one until he comes out of hospital. One of the things one of the speculated theories about why he was stabbed was that there was this organization called ICU, International Commission of Journalists. I can't remember the full name, but it's something like that. You can check it out. And apparently they received some disk of some very highly confidential information, something like 2,500 or companies in BVI and also other islands. And it's all about how these very influential Chinese leaders store their wealth through and control them through all these 2,000 odd companies. And so this disc was then distributed to a number of different journalists all over the world, and Kevin Lau was one of them in Power. And they wrote a story some time ago, I think last year, about just how mainland leaders hold properties through these web of confidential secret companies. So don't think that Hong Kong has no bargaining power, because consider that even in the mainland, if they want any of their ill-gotten gains or any of their private property protected, they want to do so through Hong Kong as well. And also, there's a lot of software that we in Hong Kong have. If you talk to a lot of these people in the financial industry, they'll be able to tell you that although Shanghai and other mainland cities want to emulate Hong Kong, but they don't have the software. That means the people, the talents, the expertise, the professionalism, the integrity. That's very important too. And the mainlanders, they're not stupid. They actually recognize it. They recognize that Hong Kong has its value. And you don't want to be like another mainland city. Our value lies in being Hong Kong, in having these very reliable institutions like the ICAC, rule of law, independent judiciary, independent legal profession, and really good customs and practices of any accountancy, medical doctors, or in the financial industry. We have the critical mass for it, and we do not want to destroy our own strength in this regard. So it's important if everybody do their bit, their little bit in standing up for professionalism. For example, I don't know whether you remember Jenny Moon, who is this lady who heads the consultant company that did the consultancy report for the government. And the government pretends that, well, somehow they want to hide behind this consultant report and say it's because of the consultant's recommendation. They think only 2 out of the 3 applicants will survive in the new television, free television, and therefore they decided to only grant 2 licenses. And Jenny says, no, that's not what the report said. We didn't say anything like that. Of course, her boss in the headquarters in Italy fired her. So she paid a very high price for being honest, for telling the truth. And in fact, the Asia and Hong Kong branch was actually set up by her. So it's actually an extremely heavy price that she paid. But there are Hong Kong people who like that. If you look at Li Wailing, if you look at Kevin Lau, if you look at Jenny, these are Hong Kong people who actually can serve as icons for Hong Kong people to say, well, there is a value, there is a reason for standing up for what's right. And this is what I mean by defending the system in Hong Kong, the one country, 2 systems. But if everybody goes and, pat on the horse's bottom, that shoe shining, of course Hong Kong is going to be like any other city in the mainland China. So don't think we don't have negotiating power, don't think we don't have value, and no government can continue to govern, if the people don't obey, whatever the government wants to do. So that's why civil disobedience is something we have to think of very seriously. I'm not saying that, you all should go and occupy Central, or should rush into Ledgecombe and occupy Ledgecombe. But if you look at what's happening in Taiwan, I'm not saying that's going to necessarily be the right way for Hong Kong, but they have a long history of struggle, a long history of defending their freedom, whereas we don't. Hong Kong people, in a way, had it too easy, and we're not used to paying a price for defending our freedoms and democracy. And when you say fight for democracy, what actually do you mean? You just mean uttering the words, or you mean something more? In more than what are you to do? So, you shouldn't give up even before you've done anything about it. Don't give up. And I used to think hope was the most important thing. Now, having read what this Taiwanese guy wrote, I now believe that determination and persistence is more important than just having hope.